Well, Nigeria's growth eased to 6.5% in the third quarter of 2012 and is likely to average 6.4% this year. Analysts say that the moderate slowdown will primarily reflect a weaker agricultural growth that's due to security issues in the north and recent floods. For more on this, we're joined by Lucy Corkin, the country risk analyst at RMB. Lucy, thanks so much for joining us today. So let's firstly talk about the impact that security issues, terrorism in Nigeria has had on the economy. Break it down for us.
Well, essentially, Sam, Boko Haram has been an Islamic fundamentalist organization based in northern Nigeria. Essentially, what they want is Sharia law to be rolled out across Nigeria, and they're pursuing this through violent means. At RMB, we've never seen Boko Haram to be a systemic issue. It's more of a symptom of a structural problem in Nigeria, because obviously power sharing between the Islamic north and the Christian south has been an issue in Nigeria for as long as the establishment of the state.
And of course, we've got a Christian leader at this point in time from the south and Boko Haram from the north. But they've come out and said that they're prepared to declare a ceasefire because they understand that people are suffering unnecessarily. Do you think this is going to happen? Is there a certainty in this?
Well, it's difficult to say at this stage. The government in Abuja has greeted this statement with cautious optimism, waiting an entire day before actually issuing a statement. There are two things to be aware of. First of all, there is skepticism that Boko Haram will actually agree and stick to their announcement of a ceasefire, because there have been negotiations between Boko Haram and the government previously which were not honoured and broke down. But secondly, there has been an enormous amount of splintering in Boko Haram in the last couple of years. So although Sheikh Abu Mohammed bin Abdulaziz did come out with this ceasefire, whether he speaks for Boko Haram as an entire unit, it's difficult to say, particularly as their supreme leader has been very silent on this issue.
And just looking on the wires today, a report coming through that the second in command made comments today, and those interpreted as saying that they might not stick to their ceasefire. That's how it's been read in the media. So that, of course, an indication that those at the center of the group could in fact renege on their deal.
Exactly. It's an incredibly difficult situation to navigate. The government is aware that they are dealing with an organization that has, as I said, splintered. And although when the announcement was made, the announcer in question said that any units of Boko Haram that did not stick to the ceasefire agreement could, with their blessing, be arrested by the Nigerian government. This obviously does not solve the problem if they're not dealing with the ringleaders who have the power.
And of course, if the group splinters more, there's no control really of terrorism. So what type of threat does that pose right now? Because of course you've got two issues going on. You've got the threat of terrorism, and then you've got the threat of splinter groups that have no control. And who does government negotiate with?
I think the big issue for the Nigerian government at the moment is essentially to isolate this. Boko Haram does suffer from the problem that it does not have wide local support. The ceasefire agreement was made on the back of the fact that it was recognized that the very people who would possibly, in a sense, support Boko Haram in terms of its promotion of an Islamic Nigerian state were actually suffering, because they are the ones that are living in the northern parts of Nigeria. And essentially, in terms of this problem, the Nigerian government realizes that they need to navigate this issue in a kind of a two-pronged approach, which they have been taking in the last couple of months. Obviously, they have approached it with a much more forceful military approach in terms of trying to isolate and capture certain of the ringleaders. But they have continued with their efforts to negotiate with Boko Haram. Obviously, they do treat this, as I said, with certain levels of suspicion. But the idea is to to make overtures to this movement in that they are willing to negotiate and they're aware of these grievances that must be addressed.
Now, just looking at the conditions that they agreed to the ceasefire on, basically saying that they want some of the mosques rebuilt, and they also want some of those who have been arrested to be released, and that of course is what the government would have to agree to right now. But overall, how would you describe investor sentiment towards Nigeria? Because you said basically at RMB you don't see it as systemic risk, but just looking at those kind of forecasts in terms of growth, it has impacted economic growth.
Absolutely, of course it has, and it will continue to do so. But Nigeria is obviously one of the most exciting and dynamic economies in Africa. What these events essentially show us is that although it's very exciting, there are lots of opportunities in Nigeria. Doing business in Nigeria, you have to walk into that jurisdiction with both eyes wide open.
And two security guards on either side.
Possibly, but essentially, there is a lot going for Nigeria. The government is aware of these issues and have taken concrete steps to address them. They have been much more proactive in recent months and in the last couple of quarters than they have previously, which means they do acknowledge the impact that these terrorist activities are having on their economy, and is also possibly a reason why Nigeria has put troops in Mali, because they are cognizant of the possibility that the kind of Islamic fundamentalism that they're seeing in northern Nigeria could possibly link up with what's happening in Mali. This would pose a systemic threat to not just Nigeria, but the whole of Western Africa if these cells were to link up.
Difficult to know if they're not already linked, though. That's the thing.
Well, both groups have connections with Al-Qaeda, but from what is known at the moment, it doesn't seem that they are working in coordination with one another.